Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Flash Gordon, the pilot episode of the Flash Gordon series. So, when actually going on into this episode, or just this show in general, like when watching the movie and then like going into this, you can see like there's kind of like the Flash Gordon update, where like reasonably in this show we kind of have a much more like Smallville approach to Flash Gordon, and how we also had this show kind of feel like the CW's like Beauty and the Beast, because I can't help but look at this show and then look at that and just be like, man, there's a lot of heavy similarities to both of these things. But when going to this show, I would say like there's a lot of stuff where people are like, that's Ming in this show, like that's this in this show. They go about this approach in this show, where like in the original movie, like you basically have to take a rocket to go to the planet Ming. Where like in this show, everything is just a portal away. Like it's kind of like Sliders, how all of a sudden you have to like go through this portal and head to this new world. It's kind of like they kind of take the convenient way out to just be like, hey man, we need to like we definitely need to be able to like easily like not have to do like a rocket every single time we're going to certain places. Let's just do this portal thing. It's more convenient. Like I don't know what the more current iteration of like Flash Gordon is in books or stories or whatever, or even if there is a Flash Gordon thing that exists. Uh, I don't know. I just really just enjoyed this goofy show. Here's one thing though. There is a robotic presence that is within this show. It's like robotic or alien, and I'm not probably sure exactly what like things are to be called. So there's going to be some like learning blocks where I'm just going to naturally assume, oh, this is this thing that gets sent out. So really, if there's any kind of confusion for what actually gets sent out or whatever, and like just check out the episode. Reasonably right now, like I think you can see this show on Pluto TV, but you could also go out of your way to go into numerous apps and see this for absolutely free, especially if Pluto TV has trials or whatever. Go ahead and check out without a doubt. You can go into letters C movies or C movies, and so or you could also go into Fox HD movies and check this out. Uh, More than likely, I would highly just recommend going into C movies. You'll probably just be able to get a different setup of servers that you can probably go and like see kind of a different, cleaner version of this. I think like for Fox HD movies, it kind of like doesn't do the exact episode. So I would just say C movies. It's probably just a better jump off point for you to be able to see this show, and then you just kind of maybe are like, man, you know what, I like this show or whatever. Like you can probably get the whole complete set for a really cheap price because I don't know. So, anyways, so let's tee it up for people that have never heard of this Flash Gordon thing before this show, because we really have to do a lot of retcons or a lot of changing compared to the original movie that a lot of people, of course, know of. So in this iteration of Flash Gordon is not to be the quarterback of the New York Jets. He is to just be some marathon runner. It's like, so, like, this guy is probably not making money off of marathon wins. This guy is, like, maybe he's getting sponsored by all this, and so maybe he is getting some kind of money or whatever that is probably just to be fed to probably charities. But yeah, so we also have Dale, who I think in the original movie was a flight planner. In this movie or in this show, this iteration, she's to just be a news reporter. I'm like, well, that's kind of convenient because like everybody has to be a news reporter. Like look at Lois Lane, look at freaking like every female like like she's there. It's always that she's some kind of lawyer or some kind of like there's always that kind of thing, like that always stereotypical, like, oh, female lead, she's gonna be this kind of person. It's always that way. But anyway, so moving on. So eventually Flash is to go on and do this marathon, and Dale is to be the reporter that is going to catch Flash as he finishes. And supposedly Dale in this episode is hiding the fact that she is engaged to some detective. And eventually, like, both her and Flash are having this exchange of just talking, like catching up. Because I guess it seems that a lot of people had gone away and now are coming back. We also, weirdly enough, have Flash's car, who doesn't have like a certain piece upon his car, so it's gonna be hard for him to tell like when to be able to fill up his car. But anyways, so it seems like Flash is trying to get answers about his father in this episode, because really, it seems that a man called Dr. Hans Zarkov is to come back into Flash's life, if he ever did come back into his life, and mention to him about his father, and if he is to ever see his father again, like kind of just tell him that like Hans was like there or whatever. And so like Flash is just like, my dad is dead and I don't know what you're talking about. So really, Flash is now wanting to desperately figure out, like, what had happened with his father, and eventually that leads to him asking stuff, like, to his mother, and asking him about certain, like, a certain thing that evidently his father's last project was to be on. And so that eventually leads to having some of Ming's like scouts or guards eventually making their way over to Earth, and eventually people are starting to spot this. Eventually people are sadly enough dying from these things because they don't know any better. And so eventually what ends up happening is it seems that Flash is to eventually start getting more and more answers, and it also feels like Flash is doing a little bit more better investigating than these detectives are. And so eventually Flash is to eventually get confronted with this robotic guard thing, and eventually he's going to have to uniquely fight this thing out. So, eventually we head to having to discover this whole, like, this way of which that both people are going to Earth or vice versa. Or how people who are from Earth that are from Ming's or Mongo is eventually like going back. So eventually we'll have to figure that out. So yeah, so with that said, I think I'm just gonna go into spoilers about this episode. It's like it's a okay show. Like we have this kind of like Smallville kind of approach to this. Like if anything, like there's gonna be some familiar names, but maybe not familiar like ways of which that like these characters were to look from original iteration. But like I don't know, like people could probably say that this show was just like it was something to watch. So more than likely it might be something like that for you. So without further ado, let's go into Flash. Let's go into this spoiler of an episode. Spoiler time, it's about that time we do spoil. this episode. So, very beginning of it, we have Flash, who is to be making his way to his marathon run. Coincidentally, Flash is to eventually, once getting to the race, he is to, of course, get the number one. Gee golly, I wonder why. So, Flash is to be driving along with his friend Nick, and evidently Flash had ran out of gas in his car because he doesn't have a gas gauge, and so because this is like an antique car, and like you can kind of tell that I guess Flash is kind of an antique guy. So Flash is to basically change in his car to get ready for the race, and by the time that he gets there, like the guns are like popping off, and now like Flash is going to have to do this race. Luckily, his mother was there, and he filled everything out for him. So Flash just gets his number one, like papered sash or whatever, and just starts running this marathon. Eventually, he starts to get tripped up by certain people, but eventually, of course, Flash wins this whole thing because he's won 2 years before. So, of course, for the winner of all this, we have to have the news covering this whole thing. And so that leads to have Dale going like I guess that I should probably interview Flash. And so all of a sudden, Dale is to kind of turn her engagement ring around so Flash maybe wouldn't have noticed. And so Flash is to pull Dale aside between the cameraman and Nick, and just kind of catch up a little bit because like he hasn't seen her in I don't know how long, and it seems like Dale's life has really just taken off. Where Dale sees like Steven's life as it's just been like, oh yeah, the very last thing that you saw me doing, that's it. Like really, there hasn't been much that has just catapulted me into any kind of other arenas or whatever. I'm just same old Flash, even though he's technically the hero of this town. It's like he just runs marathons and just yeah. Uh, so eventually, like after Flash and Dale are to catch up, eventually Flash is just like, well, how about we go and do the interview? And Dale's like, okay, sure. So in the very beginning of this episode, the very beginning, we just see both Ming the Merciless and a guy named Rankle. Let's go with that. Uh, Ming and Rankle are going and opening up a portal to Earth to send a scout out, like this little robotic scout, to uh, to go and send to Earth to just kind of like see what's what. And they end up finding out like that this or we end up finding out that the scout is to eventually just go about its business, all of a sudden to have been taken out by some trucker with this shotgun. And so all of a sudden we eventually have this trucker who eventually uh, takes this scout, whatever is left of it, to give to Dale, and he exchanges it for some lottery ticket because he asks for like $100 to see it, $500 to touch it. And so Dale is just like, I'm not doing that. Like, we don't pay people for stories. So what ends up happening is they exchange for the lottery ticket. And so Dale pulls this thing out, and it's just a tub of goop. And Dale is like, wow, like I just like there's like diddly worth of proof to be able to say that this thing was like anything. So it's just another uh like fake alien story. So and they're gonna get a lot of those recently or currently. So Anyways, so what ends up happening is Flash is to, because like this episode kind of jumps all over the place. There's a lot of flashbacks to be had in this episode, and so we have Flash who is to eventually see this RV with this creepy looking guy, and so Flash continues to see this guy just driving around town, always looking at Flash. And so it just gets to the point where like Flash is to finally just confront this guy. And so what ends up happening is like Nick and Flash are at this club, and so Flash is to go on and just chase this guy down by like running alongside his car, grabbing onto this ladder, this RV, and then eventually just like forcing this guy to stop. So, Dr. Hans is to like forcibly talk to Flash and mention that he used to work with his father and they used to do this project together called the Portage Initiative. Portage Initiative. So that leads to having Hans mention, it's like, well, hey, if you ever see your father again, like give him my best kind of thing. And so like Flash is just like, my father is dead, and Hans is just like, I don't think so. So eventually we are to start seeing like flashbacks eventually in this episode about both Flash and his father. And so what we are to actually see is and I'm trying to find Flash's father's name. Lawrence Gordon, Dr. Lawrence Gordon. Yeah, I'm assuming that has to be it. We see young Flash and Lawrence Gordon. It seems like they had always been like trying to get like Flash to practice like being able to run, to the point where I guess Lawrence was really like gunning for his son to eventually be really good at running. So it seems that Flash's name was always Steven, but he ended up getting his nickname Flash from his father. And so but his parents still always called him like his mother always calls him Steven. So eventually what ends up happening is Flash, like one late night, is to eventually like go around his home, I guess finding some like late night snack or something like that. All of a sudden he ends up seeing this like glowing thing coming from the bottom of this door. And so Flash goes and knocks on his father's door, and it's like, well, hey, like what was that weird flashing? And Lawrence was to mention that it was to just be like the TV. And Flash is like, yeah, no, like I like it doesn't quite feel like TV flashes. Like there's something like different looking about it. And so Lawrence is just like, you know what? I think you're just seeing things. It's like, if anything, buddy, like just go back to bed. So Flash is to go back to bed, supposedly like his father said, but then again he ends up seeing that weird looking flash of a thing that he doesn't quite understand. So, what? And I'm want to try to get all this like flashback stuff covered, so we can kind of get this all out of the way. So, Flash is to eventually confront his mother about this whole event, on how like he went and saw a colleague of his father's, and so we have Flash confronting his mom and asking about the Portage Initiative. And so she ends up like cracking an egg, like Laura Gordon, cracks an egg like after hearing this name being pronounced. And so Laura will, of course, not tell Flash anything, and it just seems like Flash is like, God, could I just get an answer from somebody? Like, why tell me these things and then just like not tell me things? Like, what is the reason behind that? So, what eventually ends up happening in this episode is all of a sudden we are to have these portals that seem to arrive at this Excalibur Lanes, which is a bowling alley. Because all of a sudden we see a bowler who ends up taking his bowling ball, and tossing it down the lane, and it disappears. All of a sudden, for us to see, I guess, a Mongo prison guard who looks very robotic appears at this Excalibur Lanes and is to all of a sudden just start like making its way into through this bowling alley, attacking people. And so all of a sudden that is to get wind of the people that are, of course, news reporters that are, of course, are like Dale and her like her boss, I guess, who is Jolie. Jolie. So it seems that they go and like think that this is going to be another fake alien sighting, and so they have no never mind about it. They're like, nah, like let's have the cops just like do another prank call, or what the heck is this? So eventually what is to end up happening is this prison guard, I could be wrong about that, eventually goes on to attack some man in the middle of nowhere, where this guard is to laser this guy to death. But it seems like this guy with this laser, he ended up just having his body getting microwaved. So eventually, I guess there is actually like a crime scene being put together. And so what ends up happening is both Dale and Flash are to try and start looking for Dr. Hans Zarkov. And eventually that leads them to go to this crime scene that seems very unusual. Dale is to go off to talk to this detective who is Joe Wiley, and when he goes and gets some alone time with her, he ends up kissing her because we end up finding out Joe is to be the one engaged to Dale. So what ends up happening is like Dale is asking about this case, and so this guy is just thinking that there is to be some military weapon that I guess they used here for whatever reason. And Dale is just like, why would anybody just go into like podunk nowhere and just like fire off a laser and kill somebody? Like that just seems weird, and it's a military gun. Like why would the military do that? That just seems odd. And so like that's the only thing that Joe can just wildly come up with. And so like Flash is to call Joe over like, hey buddy, just letting you know, it seems like there is some weird giant footprints here that like look fairly odd, and it seems like both of these feel like someone who had been like jumping high between these footprints. And Joe is like, hey, Flash, how about you leave the detective work to the detectives? Because we're doing a bang up job. Because we're just, like, coming up with military weapon that is from any freaking where. And, like, that's just our solving of this crime to just get this whole thing wrapped up in a nice, neat little bow. Military weapon. Like, because that's always like the police, like that's always like the police's like way of thinking it's just some goofy thing that they can't explain, and it's just going to immediately just be shoved in some cold case somewhere because they can't figure it out. Um, Especially if the thing doesn't happen again, or there's no like picture of this, there's no like evidence of alienistic things going on here. So, anyways, what eventually happens is Flash and Dale are to eventually find Hans, and so they end up going and finding his RV, and then finding a place uh, where like they end up finding out Hans's address, because supposedly it seems that Flash's father had went and did this little trip up in Maine. And so Dale is like, well, like, could there be an address for that place in Maine? And so that eventually finds them onto finding Hans. So it seems like Hans is working on some weapon that is to take down supposedly these Ming people. But really, all that it actually does when it is to actually fire is to basically take this thing and teleport it back from whence it came. Like, it's not like a kill device. It's basically just a thing to just like, hey, go away, pew. Like, plus this is like a giant thing of a gun. I'm just like, good God, this thing looks huge. Like, this looks like it could be like a bazooka kind of weapon. Like for how this like thing is so freaking big. So uh, so what ends up happening is Hans is to explain a little bit more about what Dr. Gordon had been involved in. And so I guess that Lawrence had been able to come up with this portal device. And so what ended up happening is Lawrence decided to go into the device, or go into the portal, to eventually see what would happen. Hence why Lawrence is now gone. And because they had come up with this device first, so I'm assuming probably Flash's father went to that other planet and like had been tortured and taken over with until like this guy could produce this device yet again to have Ming's people come over to this planet. So that leads us to now having all of a sudden like this this Ming guard is to have supposedly Flash Gordon's address, and so like this Ming guard took this guy's car after he microwaved him to eventually travel to Flash Gordon's home. And so this guard ended up like controlling Flash's mother by putting these like needles into her neck. And so Flash Gordon's mom is calling Flash and calling him Flash, which is like not the name she would call him. And so Laura is calling Flash and like, hey, when are you gonna be home, Flash? Like, hey, like I have a pie in the oven. When are you coming home? And so Flash is like, okay, this is kind of weird. like my mom doesn't normally call me Flash. So what eventually ends up happening is Hans or Zarkov is to decide that, yeah, like your mother must be like being taken under control by some Ming character, so I guess we need to go to your home and take this thing down. Supposedly, like Zarkov's device isn't fully tested, but I guess he's gonna just try it anyways to see if it works. Great. Because this guy doesn't know what he's doing, in all honesty. So But if anything, like the science is there, where he kind of mentions like how they need to like be able to create a device that sucks these things back from whence they came. I guess that's kind of smart. So eventually, Flash is to go into the front door, and we have both Dale and Zarkov that are coming from the back. So Flash is to talk to his mom, and Flash's mom is just like, "Oh yeah, I got a pie for you," and so Flash is telling like he's basically in code talking to Laura, but he's also talking to like the two of them, kind of asking it's like, well, hey, like what kind of pie is this? How tall of a pie is this? Like also like maybe I should go and just deal with this pie myself because maybe somebody can't handle all this pie. So all of a sudden, Zarkov is to use its weapon against this robot, and so all of a sudden that leaves Laura's mother to fall onto the or Flash's mother Laura to fall onto the ground, and so all of a sudden we just have Flash who's just trying to like punch this thing in the face, which he's like ah, and so he ends up like drop kicking it, and that actually kind of like knocks it down a little, and so all of a sudden we just have Flash who's just wielding a freaking like pan and smacking this thing. And so all of a sudden, Dale gets out this blender and tries to like attack this thing with the blender, and Flash is like, "No, don't do the blender. Like my mother would kill me." So, because what ends up happening is Zarkov tries to shoot off his weapon, but all of a sudden, like the charge of this thing just goes all over the place. So it's just like, okay, I guess that didn't work. Nice job to really have tested this whole weaponry. So, so Flash is just smacking this thing around with some like with a pan, and all of a sudden, Dale comes up with this interesting idea to like take this like wire from the blender and like also take this like musical fork of a thing and like shove it into this guard and electrify it, and so that ends up like nuking this thing, and like it all just ends up into pieces onto the ground. And so Flash takes his mother to this couch and she ends up waking up, and so Flash is just like, hey, like maybe you should just go to bed, I'll get you some tea, and like you might just really just need to rest. Like if anything, Laura doesn't remember what had happened in like the time that she was basically abducted or whatever. So Flash goes into the kitchen to see like Zarkov and Dale cleaning up alien juice, and so Flash is to notice that this thing was to have like his father's like driver's license on him. It's like, ah, like so that must be where he figured out where I was. And then all of a sudden they also find this device that is to be some kind of thing that is to track something. And so they're like, oh, okay, so I guess like there's got to be something with this. So Flash drives to the location of where they're supposed to like find whatever this thing is, and once they actually get to it, they find out that it's a portal. So it's like, okay, so it tracks where the portals are. So like when you're on Earth, you can just easily just hit this remote thing and like go to Ming or Mongo or vice versa. So it's like, oh, okay, so it's just a like a portal device. So Flash decides that he is going to go to Mongo or Ming's planet. And so like Zarkov is like, dude, that's a horrible idea. And Dale is like, yeah, and I don't want you to go either. Like Zarkov is mentioning that this is probably a suicide like mission and he'll probably die doing it. And Flash is just like, well, yeah, but I might find my father, so like I need to go. So like Dale is kind of preventing him from going, but Flash is like, dude, I'm going. Like I gotta go. I probably will find my father. He's probably still alive. So we also have one moment where Laura eventually, while during the phone call of of uh, of Flash, she also talks about this IMAX, which I know what the IMAX is, but like eventually we'll get down the road and know what that is also. Um, Also, let's go into this. So Dale was to talk about that Flash needs a new like kind of watch. Like his watch is to be really tattered, and Flash is to say like no, like it's the last like thing of my father's, so I'm gonna keep this watch even though like it looks busted or whatever. Like it's the last thing of my dad's, and so like I'm gonna keep it forever because evidently out of all the stuff that like they couldn't find of his father, they found this watch, and so Flash is gonna keep the watch. So with that said, take that all with what you will. So, uh, anyways, so Flash and Dale are to head into Mongo's planet, and so really we just all of a sudden see that both of these people are to get like sucked up into this ship, and I guess are to be sent to Maine. Just kind of like the old Flash Gordon movie kind of goes into. But yeah, so like really I think I covered most of this. There might have been like some flashbacks here or there that I probably didn't cover, or there's probably something that I probably didn't go into. But I think I covered most of this episode. I hope so. I am going to get out of here. If there's probably something that I didn't cover, I might have a rebuttal in the next episode, if that even happens. If people want this enough, if people are interested, I'm willing to do the show. Believe me. It's just all like if I get another donut hole's worth of zero of views on this one, I might just be like, yeah, I'm not gonna continue because like Legion, it got to the point where I started like the first 3 episodes of season 1, and I'm like, yeah, I'm just gonna like just no longer do the show. Like I just feel like people just don't care, even though I liked it and I finally wanted to like finish the whole like show up. Like people, I guess, just didn't care, so I just stopped watching it. So who knows? Thank you for watching this. If you watched the whole thing, I really do appreciate it. But anyways, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.